What if I told you that some of the most beautiful wagons ever created weren't meant to be remembered, but to be used? For years, when we think about classic station wagons, we almost always look back to the 1950s, wood paneling, the perfect family image, and the innocence of an America that still believed everything would turn out just fine. But the 1960s changed that story. The culture changed, the attitude changed. And without many people noticing, the way wagons were designed changed. Too, they stopped being just practical. They became longer, more aggressive, more confident. Some began to look like coupes disguised as family cars. Others drifted dangerously close to luxury and even muscle car territory, and that raises an uncomfortable question. Were the 1960s the moment when wagons reached their most beautiful form? In this video, we're going to explore the most beautiful American wagons of the 1960s. Number 9. 1969 Chevelle Concours Wagon. This is where everything changes. The Chevelle Concours isn't just a good-looking late 1960s wagon. It's a warning music, a clear signal of where the American automobile was headed. Unlike everything we've seen before, this wagon no longer tries to hide anything. The proportions are more aggressive. The stance is lower. The presence is more tense. Visually, it's far closer to a muscle car than to a traditional wagon. Its defining trait is that it was one of the first wagons to directly share the soul and platform of a true muscle car. This wasn't a late family adaptation. It was quite literally a Chevelle with extra space. You can see it from any angle. The car looks ready to move fast even when standing still. There's no unnecessary softness. No decorative nostalgia. There is intent inside. The atmosphere is no longer about the calm family trips of the early 1960s. Everything feels more driver-focused, firmer, more purposeful. The wagon stops being a family hub and starts becoming a road tool. Under the hood, that transformation is confirmed. The Chevelle Concours could be fitted with V8 engines well above 300 horsepower. Including power plants closely related to the biggest names in the muscle car world, acceleration was forceful. Throttle response immediate, and the driving experience had nothing innocent about it. This wasn't a wagon for cruising, it was a wagon for moving fast. The concourse represents the symbolic end of an era. The exact moment when the wagon stops looking to the past and starts competing with the future. After this car, the concept would never be the same. The 1970s were just around the corner. And with them came a new obsession, unapologetic power. After looking at all these wagons, one thing becomes very clear. The 1960s were a decade of transition. A period when the wagon stopped being just a family car and began searching for its own identity. Number 8. 1969 Chevrolet Kingswood Estate. This is one of those wagons almost no one talks about, and that's exactly why it's so interesting. The Kingswood arrived at the end of the 1960s when American design had already shed any trace of innocence. Everything here is wider, lower, and visually more serious. There's no soft nostalgia. There is presence. Its unique strength is that it became one of the cleanest and most visually balanced wagons of the late decade at a time when many brands were leaning heavily into excess. No exaggerated lines, no visual tricks, everything is well proportioned. That's why it looks surprisingly modern today. The front end is straight and solid. The side profile flows without interruption, and the whole car conveys a clear sense of control. It doesn't try to stand out, but it doesn't hide either. It feels confident in its design, inside. The Kingswood delivered exactly what the exterior promised: real space, comfort, and an atmosphere closer to a long-distance highway car than a traditional family wagon. This was no longer about slow outings. This was about long, fast, steady trips. Under the hood, Chevrolet didn't hold back. The Kingswood could be equipped with large, reliable engines, perfectly aligned with the spirit of the late 1960s. The power wasn't aggressive, but it was abundant. What makes it especially interesting is that, unlike more famous models, the Kingswood never sought the spotlight. It wasn't an icon, it wasn't a cultural symbol. It simply did its job well. Today, that makes it one of the most underrated wagons of its era. One that aged better than many louder rivals. Number 7. 1968 to 1969 Oldsmobile Vista Cruiser. This car didn't need explanations. You recognized it from a distance. It's one of those wagons etched into collective memory because of a single detail, and that was no accident. Its defining feature was the raised panoramic roof with glass panels above the rear seats. A solution originally meant to improve visibility, but one that ended up becoming its unmistakable visual signature. At a time when many wagons were starting to look alike, the Vista Cruiser had its own identity. It wasn't aggressive like a muscle car, nor formal like a Chrysler. It was modern, functional, and above all, different visually. It no longer belonged to the early 1960s. It was longer, lower, wider. It felt like a car designed for an America that had already changed. Inside, the effect of the roof was immediate. More light, a greater sense of space, and a completely different experience for rear passengers. Riding in a Vista Cruiser didn't feel like being in the back of a family car. It felt special. Under the hood, Oldsmobile matched that design with era-appropriate mechanicals. The Vista Cruiser could be fitted with V8 engines producing around and above 300 horsepower. Power plants designed to move large bodies effortlessly while sustaining highway speeds with ease. It was no longer just about getting there. It was about traveling fast and well here. Power wasn't meant to impress. It was meant to support a lifestyle. The Vista Cruiser represents something crucial on this list. The moment when the wagon stops looking backward and starts looking toward the future. Less childlike nostalgia, more modernity, more presence, and with that, we approach the end of the decade because the next car is no longer just a beautiful wagon. It's a clear statement of where American design was heading. Number 6, 1964 Chrysler Town & Country. After the stylistic chaos of the Polar, the Town & Country appears as its complete opposite. Order, prestige, silent authority. This was not a wagon designed to please everyone. It was a wagon designed to impress without effort in the 1960s. Chrysler understood luxury in very clear terms: size, presence, and a constant feeling of being one step above. And the Town & Country carried that philosophy into the family car world without compromise. Its most distinctive trait is how it turned the wagon into a symbol of status. Here, the wood was no longer artisanal or nostalgic. It became institutional, almost executive. A car built for someone who traveled with family, but also with reputation. Visually, the car feels large from every angle, long, imposing, with a design that doesn't seek dynamism, but respect, and beneath that formal presence, there was plenty of power. The Town & Country could be equipped with V8 engines producing over 340 horsepower, large, smooth engines designed to move this massive body with absolute ease. There was no urgency, no drama. Power was delivered the same way the car presented itself, calmly and confidently at highway speeds. The car never felt strained. It felt comfortable, stable, as if that were exactly its natural environment inside. The experience reinforced everything the exterior promised: wide seats, quality materials, and a sense of isolation that turned any long journey into something almost ceremonial. And now tell me, are you more drawn to a wagon that conveys luxury and status like the Town & Country? Or do you prefer something bolder and more controversial like the Pola? Leave it in the comments because this comparison divides classic car lovers like few others. Number 5, 1960 Dodge Polar Station Wagon. If so far we've seen wagons that were elegant, balanced, and culturally familiar, the Polar arrives to break the harmony. This car was controversial from day one. The Polara was born during one of the most chaotic moments in American design history. Tense lines, strange volumes, proportions that were hard to read. For many, it was simply ugly. For others, far too bold for a family car, and yet it had something impossible to ignore. The Polar is one of the earliest wagons where the unfiltered excess of early 1960s design fully revealed itself. It didn't try to soften its styling. It didn't seek consensus. It embraced visual risk as part of its identity. But the real surprise comes when you look under the hood. Dodge offered V8 engines in the Polar, producing over 300 horsepower, including large displacement engines designed to move heavy bodies with absolute authority. For a 1960 station wagon, those numbers were anything but subtle. The contrast was striking from the outside. It looked like a questionable styling experiment. From behind the wheel, it felt powerful, solid, and surprisingly quick for its size. The acceleration wasn't nervous or sporty, it was forceful, linear, as if the car always had more power in reserve than it needed to show. That made the Polara feel even larger than it already was, more dominant, mechanically more serious than its chaotic design suggested. Today, that controversial styling is exactly what makes it so compelling. The Polar didn't age trying to please, it aged being honest to its era. A decade that was beginning to push boundaries without yet knowing where they were. A wagon that's uncomfortable to look at but impossible to ignore. Number 4, 1963 to 1965 Ford Country Squire. This car needs no introduction. Even if many people don't remember its name, they remember its shape. The Country Squire wasn't just a popular wagon. It was part of everyday American life in the 1960s. The car you saw in neighborhoods, on family vacations, and old photographs we now look at with nostalgia. And yet reducing it to the family car doesn't do it justice, unlike wagons from the 1950s. The 1960s Country Squire no longer felt innocent. It was big, imposing, with a presence that occupied the road without asking permission. Its most distinctive feature wasn't just the wood paneling, but how it was integrated into a far more serious and authoritative design. Here, the wood was no longer decorative or artisanal. It was part of a solid, almost institutional visual identity. The car communicated stability, confidence, and a clear sense of this works. The front end was wide and reassuring. The proportions were designed to dominate. It wasn't elegant in the refined Mercury sense. It was elegant in a deeply American way, honest, robust, and functional. Inside, everything was built to be lived with: real space, consistent comfort. A layout that made long trips feel natural, not forced. Under the hood, Ford offered reliable, adequate V8 engines. Power plants that didn't seek the spotlight, but always delivered. There was no mechanical drama here. There was solidity, and that was exactly what millions of buyers wanted. The Country Squire didn't try to stand out. It didn't try to be special, and precisely because of that, it became one of the most important cars of its decade. Number 3, Mercury Colony Park. After the character and attitude of the Safari, we arrive at a very different kind of beauty. Quieter, more mature, far more confident in itself. The Colony Park never tried to be the flashiest wagon on the road. It didn't have Pontiac's aggression or Ford's mass-market fame, and that was exactly where its strength came from. Visually, everything about it speaks of balance. Long, clean lines, well-resolved proportions. A presence that doesn't ask for attention, yet commands it naturally. This was a wagon built for someone who wanted something better, without needing to explain it. And here's its most interesting trait. The Colony Park was conceived as an alternative of discreet luxury. A wagon that spoke more about status than about family duty. It wasn't aimed at the typical station wagon buyer. It was for someone who had already been there, someone who valued comfort, silence, and a carefully crafted image without excess. Inside, that idea was reinforced. Quality materials, a calming sense of space, and an atmosphere designed for unhurried travel. There was no sporting intent here, but there was a constant feeling of solidity and control. Under the hood, Mercury offered smooth yet authoritative V8 engines. Power plants not meant to impress with headline numbers, but to move the body effortlessly. The power was always there, but never anxious. Everything happened smoothly, almost elegantly. The Colony Park didn't shout nostalgia. It created it, and now I want to know what you think. Do you prefer a wagon with obvious character like the Safari or the silent elegance of the Colony Park? Leave it in the comments, because that choice says a lot about how each of us understands classic beauty. Number 2, 1960 Pontiac Safari. If the Impala represented confident elegance, the Safari already showed the first signs of rebellion. Pontiac entered the 1960s with a very clear idea: its car should never feel passive. And the Safari proved that this philosophy could apply to a wagon as well. At first glance, it's obvious this isn't just a family hauler. The front end is more aggressive, the sidelines carry more tension, and the overall stance communicates something unusual for a station wagon of the era: attitude. But here's the detail that makes it truly special. The Safari was one of the first wagons to directly inherit the performance DNA of its coupe counterpart. It wasn't just a family body style adapted for practicality. Pontiac designed the Safari as a natural extension of its more performance-oriented lineup. You can see it in the proportions, in the way the car sits on the road, and in how it always looks ready to move quickly. Inside, it remained spacious and comfortable. But the atmosphere was no longer neutral. It felt closer to a car meant to be driven, not just used. The driver was no longer an afterthought. And under the hood, that intention was confirmed. The Safari could be equipped with V8 engines producing over 300 horsepower, figures that were uncommon for wagons at the beginning of the decade. Not because Pontiac wanted to turn it into a muscle car, but because it understood that character was part of the appeal. The result was a wagon that never felt innocent, never looked docile, never seemed resigned. The Safari marks a key moment in this story, the point where wagons stop being just an extension of the family and begin to reflect the personality of the person behind the wheel. And from here on, the decade continues to refine that idea because the next car proves that you didn't need to be aggressive to command respect. Number 1. 1963 to 1964 Chevrolet Impala station wagon. If someone told you this wagon was designed to stir emotion, you'd probably doubt it, and yet, that's exactly what it did. The mid-1960s Impala doesn't look like a traditional wagon. It looks like a long, elegant coupe that, for some reason, decided to have 5 doors. The proportions are clean. The side profile flows smoothly, and the overall design communicates something rare in a family car. Aesthetic intention, in a decade when many designs were starting to exaggerate. The Impala chose a different path. Carefully measured chrome, large smooth surfaces. A silhouette that flows without visual interruptions. It didn't need to demand attention, it attracted it naturally. This car perfectly represents the spirit of the 1960s. Less innocence, more confidence, less decoration, more presence, inside. The Impala offered plenty of space for a family, but without the purely utilitarian feel that defined many earlier wagons. Everything felt lower, wider, and closer to a prestige car than to a simple, practical vehicle. And even though this video isn't about performance, there's something important to mention. Under the hood, the Impala could be equipped with V8 engines producing over 300 horsepower. Serious numbers for a wagon of its time, not because it was meant to be sporty, but because it reflected a new mindset. Even family cars were beginning to develop character. But the Impala's real legacy isn't in the numbers. It's in how it looked and how it made people feel. This was a wagon that didn't seem resigned to its role. A wagon that looked proud, confident, self-assured today. Many remember it simply as the family car. But viewed through modern eyes, it's clear it was much more than that. It was one of the first wagons of the 1960s to prove that beauty and practicality no longer had to be separate things. And what comes next pushes that idea even further, because the next car takes that elegance and adds muscle. Now I want to hear your opinion. If you could choose just one of these 1960s wagons to have in your garage today, which would it be, and why? The elegance of the Impala, the personality of the Safari, the presence of the country squire, or the final transition embodied by the Chevelle Concourses. Leave it in the comments because every choice tells a different story. And if this video made you see these wagons with new eyes, I recommend watching the video on screen now. There we explored the most beautiful American wagons of the 1950s. More innocent cars, more optimistic, born in a time when family and the open road meant everything. It's the perfect complement to understand how and why wagons changed so dramatically in just one decade. Click and continue this journey through nostalgia, design, and the history of the American automobile. See you in the next video. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Nostalgia Rides for more legendary cars, forgotten classics, and the real stories behind automotive history.